Well, thank y'all so much. You have really given us a lot to think about. And I wanted to take a moment and really just, yes, say yes, yes. Public participation is where it's at. So thank you, Naima. Thank you, Belinda, letting people know, hey, you have a voice in this, get involved. And I actually have a few points I wanted to touch on that I want to mention to y'all in some kind of wrap up, tying it all together here. So just a quick note, just this year, our legislature passed the allowance of the Farm Bill with Section 11. It allows for general permits of directed biogas from our CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. So that methane waste being produced there is now going to be allowed to be piped to electric generating facilities. And it's just going to make things so much worse. So we have quite a fight ahead of us. But so we are seeing we have Title VI. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if we're working within the framework, how are we going to prove that discrimination? And this is what I wanted to chat with y'all about very quickly. There's three big kind of tools that have been used with intentional discrimination, and it's showing a sequence of events. So make sure you take notes, keep notes of everything that's happening in your community, because you will show as things are happening in a certain order. Well, first the project was going to be in this area, but then those people spoke up and suddenly there was a campaign contribution and now it's being in this neighborhood. That can help prove that intentional discrimination. Another one is statistics and comparative evidence. So using that sequence of events, you can start showing, okay, statistically, whenever this campaign contribution happens, that project moves. Or statistically, when a project is being permitted, we keep seeing over and over again, it's in our BIPOC communities, what's going on. And so having that comparative evidence that we pull together will help rein that in. And then the third one is showing a history of discrimination and exclusion, especially down here in the South and Jim Crow. We're seeing there's still impacts here today. So having that history of exclusion and discrimination helps to build on the facts that we're putting together through a sequence of events, statistics, and comparative evidence. I want to talk a bit about disparity discrimination though, because that's the biggest one. It's really hard to find intent, right? It's usually, well, we didn't intend to, we were neutral in our decision, which is often the case, but there's still impacts on the ground that are disparate. So I want to make sure we're focusing on that causation and not the motive. And it's a three-step process to prove this. The first step of disparity discrimination is establishing adverse and disparate impacts. And on our next slide, it'll show a little bit about what these are. So we would have to show as the community that we are actually disparately impacted and in an adverse way. So this neutral practice actually has an effect on the ground. And ways of showing this are, okay, there's different treatments. This neighborhood has pollution, this neighborhood doesn't, or differing levels of it. Then we have asthma, we have heart conditions, cancer rates, property values plummeting. These are all hard facts that we can present as part of showing that not only is it a different or disparate impact, but that it's adverse as well. So Naima mentioned animal waste on surfaces in homes and the smells. Just keep in mind, we have a right to a peaceful enjoyment of our property. So how are we dealing with this with all the pollution? Well, those nuisance remedies were recently severely restricted in North Carolina, which was one of the only remedies available to us. So keep this in mind as we talk about some of our next steps, our next action items. So step 2 in this process of disparity discrimination, it passes the buck back to the acting agency. I'm just going to say agency, assuming it's the government acting, right? It's on them to show a substantial legitimate justification. So the agency must show that they have a reason for this practice. The usual reasons are zoning. So if it's zoned for industrial use, then they're going to approve industrial uses of that property. And guess what neighborhoods are often between the more affluent and the zoning? Well, if you have the affluent neighborhood and the zoning right next to each other, that's highly unlikely. Usually it's the buffer, and the buffer is us. It's our BIPOC communities. So that's another area where we're seeing some issues. So let's go on to step 3. Because when we go to step 3, it's on us to say, okay, fine, you have a substantial reason, zoning, right? Well, now it's on us to show that we have either an alternative practice that is equally effective and results in less disproportionate effects, or that the claim legitimate practice is actually a pretext for discrimination. So a good alternative could be, yeah, let's have a renewable energy source instead. Let's not focus on having a coal ash power plant next to us. Let's have a solar farm. That's just one example for cleaner air. I know there's other issues involved and I'm oversimplifying, but that's just an example. Another one is the pretext. So we heard, Belinda was mentioning economic development. That's going to be a word or a phrase you hear often. That is a pretext. It's a dog whistle. You'll hear dog whistle terms often to show that a quote legitimate practice is actually a pretext for discrimination. Urban centers, high crime areas, the sticks, blight, these are all dog whistles. So when you're hearing an economic development board or any of your local or state government officials mentioning these, take a quick look at what that community is, and chances are it's going to be BIPOC. So something to keep in mind. If it's not BIPOC, it might be rural and low income. So instead of saying rural and low income, so they often might say the sticks. So just something to keep in mind to have as a little red flag for yourself. So I want to touch on what you can do. So you're here to learn a little bit, and we would love to talk on and on about this. We can have a whole bunch more sessions about this to go into detail. But what can you do? Join us, volunteer, become a member, speak to your representatives. We are working with a number of communities and other organizations to make things move. So one is our environmental justice law and policy work. Excuse me. We included our contact information below each of these program areas, so you know who to contact for you to get involved as well here at Clean Water for North Carolina. But we're working with communities like the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, the North Carolina Conservation Network, among so many others. I can go off for really hours listing them all out. But we're working on proposed legislation here in North Carolina and hopefully federally as well, focusing on granting an opportunity for our state agencies to have the proper authority they need and the tools they need to have three main considerations. One is consideration of environmental justice impacts on or from the proposed actions. So proposed actions must consider the EJ impacts. There must be meaningful public participation that must weigh public concerns that are being raised and weighed. So it's not just the information being provided by the industry. And then also that will require denial of permits that disproportionately affect impacted BIPOC and low wealth communities. So that's the big EJ law and policy work we're focusing on. I also wanted to touch on our CAFOS and community science work. We're taking back that power into our communities by gathering the science ourselves. We're collecting the evidence, the data that's part of that Title VI framework. And we're also going to use it outside of that Title VI framework to really make things move. So we're looking at air and water quality data and really expanding the community involvement in this area. Language equity and water justice is another area that we've started, and we're expanding language equity across the board. So if you don't speak English, even though this event here today is in English, if you're not speaking English and you're not getting the permit materials in English, how are you meaningfully involved? Are you being unintentionally discriminated against because of your national origin? So those are all things to consider. We have our community tools project. As Belinda mentioned, there are maps showing locations of BIPOC and low-income communities in relation to pollution, but these are often really convoluted and highly technical. So our community tools program helps to rein that in, and we help produce it in a way that makes sense to the average person who's not some technical scientist. And then the last one I wanted to mention, volunteer. So stay involved in your local government. Tell us about it so we can help amplify your cause. When we help amplify your cause, it will go to the state and federal levels, which is where we tend to work, but we want to work with you on your community issues as well. So just want to quickly mention all of those before handing it over to Rachel for some quick notes before we wrap up and then start our virtual tour here at 3 o'clock in 4 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is an absolutely beautiful Saturday, so I really appreciate y'all's time, and especially Naima and Belinda. It was just an amazing experience to hear them talk about all their past work on environmental justice. And we know from Belinda's talk and Naima's talk that they are a testimony to community organizing and working for power for the people, by the people, right? So that being said, you see it on your screen right here, but let's put what we learned into action. Everything that I will be mentioning can also be found on our website calendar at CWFNC.org. And we will also be sending a wraparound email to you all with some post-meeting resources, including a feedback survey that we'd love to hear from you about. So there's a couple EPA national engagement calls coming up, and you see that there on your screen, September 28th and the 12th. Those links to register will be found on our website and in your post-meeting materials. And we've already heard a little bit about this, but Enviva Sampson is up for their first time Title V air permit. So there will be a hearing on October 19th, starting at 6 p.m. Clean Water for North Carolina will be providing some talking points for grassroots folks who want to give comment, but Dogwood Alliance is also a wonderful resource for everything wood pellets in North Carolina. And I did skip going back to October 12th. We are finally having this special meeting by the North Carolina Environmental Justice and Equity Advisory Board to talk about biogas. We've been asking for this meeting for so long. So thank you so much to Sherry and Will and Naima and Amanda and everyone else who was a power behind getting this meeting scheduled. We already talked about this a little bit, but Shelby, if you want to go to the next slide, please reach out to us and volunteer with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to even just connect with you on the phone or email. So that would be awesome. If you'd like to contribute to our work, consider becoming a member. Any donation would automatically make you a member of Clean Water for North Carolina. If you want to donate to other organizations that we partner with as well, you can find all their information on our website. We definitely want to highlight the Environmental Justice Network, where Naima is a co-director, and just make sure that we do plug them there.